Hello and welcome back to Secrets of Success from the Sober Business Network. I'm really delighted to have Duncan with us today. Duncan, would you like to say hello and give yourself a little bit of an intro?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I'm really excited about having this chat. My name is Duncan Bhaskaran Brown. I stopped drinking 8.5 years ago, and I've just been mucking around ever since.
8.5 years. That's before it was cool, Duncan. I like it.
I know. I like to think of myself as a bit of a groundbreaker. I was
Yeah.
even vegan before McDonald's invented the McPlant. So,
Oh, amazing. You're a true pioneer, actually. Ahead of your time, clearly. So it's been fantastic to have you in the Sober Business Network, Duncan, and I'm really looking forward to this chat because I don't know all that much about your business, so I'm really looking forward to finding out. So let's start off by you telling us a little bit about your foray into entrepreneurship, if that's a word, in particular into writing.
yeah, so I started young. When I was a kid, I suppose I was about 7 or 8. I decided I wanted to start a newspaper. I mean, it was
Brilliant.
the 80s, so like becoming a
Yes.
tycoon was the thing. So I got Phil. He was really into science, so he became my science correspondent. Richard was really into sport. He became my sports correspondent. Natasha, she was quite into fashion, so she did fashion. And I knew a lot about music at the time, or at least I thought I did. So I did music. And then we wrote a newspaper based on those 4 things. Why on earth I thought that any of my parents' friends would be interested in reading about sport, science, music and fashion, I don't know, but we photocopied it on one of these big kind of like industrial-sized photocopiers that they used to have back in the day, and then we ran around my parents' church on Sunday morning trying to sell it for 10p. I mean, we weren't proper good tycoons because we actually gave all the money to charity, but it was I had the red braces and everything. It was
Oh,
great. It
love
was great.
it.
But it taught me a lot about writing and about entrepreneurship, and it taught me that you don't achieve anything on your own, and that you need to build a team. You need to find people with other skills, and it also taught me that actually the secret of writing is not sitting down with a pen; it's running around trying to flog the damn thing.
Interesting. Now, isn't that interesting? And I would actually really love to read one of those. I don't know if you've still got any lying around, but from the musings of 7-year-olds, I bet it's absolutely hilarious.
Oh
uh,
yes, and now you come to mention it, I'm going to go and look and burn them
yeah.
all.
Oh. Yeah, and you're right, because I mean, writing a book is a huge undertaking. And when I sit and think about writing a book, I have one that's what 3/4 of the way written, and it's just, it's so much work. And it's, even though I've broken the back of it, the thought of finishing it is, to be honest, it's just, I never ever do it. I never mind thinking about marketing it and getting onto that side of it and flogging it. I mean, wow, where do you even
Yeah,
start? So where do
yeah.
you go after that? At age 7. What did you do at age 8 or 9?
Well, I mean, I've always been a writer, really. I I found it very difficult to find a way of expressing myself at school, because what would happen would be, I mean, one incident really, I think, sums it all up. I wrote this poem, and I rather think that it was quite a good poem. It had imagery and metaphor and interesting use of language, probably way too much alliteration, but in general, not bad for a 9-year-old. And I thought it was really, really good. And I showed it to my teacher, who just pointed out all of the spelling mistakes and how the grammar
Oh,
wasn't up to snuff. And I was just like, well, what do you mean? Because writing is not about spelling all the words right. It's not about putting the full stops in the right place. That's editing. That's not writing. That's editing. The ability to actually write something worth reading, that is the secret of writing. I knew that as a 9-year-old, but it seemed that my teacher hadn't quite grasped that and was only interested in me, putting the full stops in all the right places and using, don't splice your commas, all of that kind of
oh,
stuff.
oh
Anyway,
dear.
so I kind of fell out of love with school. So my way of expressing myself through writing got curtailed a little bit. And I did a lot more acting than I did writing. But as I got a bit older and I got a bit more involved in the theatre companies that I was working with, I realised there were opportunities to write and direct and produce and things like that. And then I got back into writing, and I spent most of my 20s writing complete nonsense for the film and television industry, which made absolutely no Oscars won, no Palme d'Ors, nothing even really broadcast. And, I think one of the reasons for that was because I just, I drank my talent. That's what I did.
Oh,
I thought
interesting.
the
Yeah.
secret to being a great writer was to drink a load because,
Yeah.
I've heard of Ernest Hemingway.
Yeah.
But actually, I look back now and I see how much it held me back.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? And just it's quite common, I think, in these kind of creative industries for people to have this genuine belief that the alcohol or the drugs are going to help them with their creative side, help them access something creative. There's quite a huge chunk about it in that Elton John film, isn't there? And the truth is, of course, that it quashes, like everything else, it quashes your creativity. So yeah, tell us about how it's been since you got sober then.
Well, I mean, the first thing that I noticed when I stopped drinking was I had all of this time. And that was initially kind of weird to me because I didn't think I spent a lot of time drinking. I worked very hard. I had the high functioning platinum card and everything, and I'd get up in the morning, I'd work, I'd be very active in community events and things after work. And, I would be genuinely pretty busy. So I would rarely start drinking before 8:30, 9 o'clock. I
Yeah.
just do that every day. And then, of course,
Yes.
if you do those kind of like 3.5 hours every day, it mounts up, doesn't it? And
Yeah.
actually 3.5 hours a day, 7 days a week, that's 24 hours.
Yeah.
That's an entire day, including all the bit you're asleep. So when I stopped drinking, I suddenly discovered, like a lot of people do, that, they have a lot more free time. So I thought, right, I'll get my pencil out. And
Yeah.
I pretty much got started on my first project. In fact, I got a bit of advice, which is one of the best pieces of advice I've ever got from a publisher. And she said, what you want to do is write the blurb, that's the bit on the back of the
Oh,
book,
yeah.
write that first. So
Yes.
you're absolutely clear about the book that you want to read. And once you've done that, the book you want to write.
Yeah.
Once you've done that, maybe write a chapter outline, maybe do 2 sample chapters. So I did the blurb, I did the chapter outline, I wrote 2 sample chapters, I looked up, I'd written 100,000 words. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
obviously got a bit carried away with all of this time and energy and focus that I'd suddenly discovered from getting sober.
Wow. Amazing. So tell us a bit about the books that you've published then.
So I released an ebook in 2016. So that was probably about a year and a half after I got
Yeah.
sober. That was about local government, and it's not very interesting. And then I released a full-length book about local government that isn't very interesting. And I got to a point with that book that I absolutely hated it after a while, because when you
Oh,
get into the kind of the rewrites and the
yeah.
editorial process and the design and the development, and you just spend all of this time going through it again and again and again and again, and you get to the point where you just hate the bloody thing.
Yeah.
But for some reason, that didn't put me off. I don't know
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
And after I wrote that one came out in 2019. That was when I started working with the Easy Way Clinic, which is the world's most successful stop smoking service. And
Yes.
I trained with them, and I started delivering sessions for them. And that's when I sort of got way more interested in how do you help people to change their behaviors around smoking, around alcohol, around diet as well. And that sort of led me to write what my next book, which was called Get Over Indulgence, which incidentally, if anybody wants to read it, you just put getover.uk into the internet and it will take you to a part of my website where you can download a PDF or a Kindle version, or you can listen to the audiobook. If you can stand listening to me for 3 hours, you can listen to the audiobook. Entirely free. Anybody can check that one out. That one came out in 2021. Yeah. That
Yeah.
sounds about right. 2021, and that's kind of my journey. The way I went from just disastrous, unhealthy living to
Mm.
actually enjoying myself and
Yeah.
being kind of healthy. And then I still didn't learn my lesson, and my last book, Real Men Quit, came out on Boxing Day.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah,
Fantastic. So if you are listening to this and you think you've got a book inside you, you've given us a great tip already about writing the blurb and doing a chapter outline, etc. But what about when it comes to actually getting an audience for the book? Like how do you even go about making a marketing plan for a book? What do you
yeah.
do?
So, funnily enough, I think probably the most important skill for a writer is not actually written ability, it's marketing. And,
Yeah.
you can prove that just by reading some successful books. Many of them
Yes.
are not very good, but they are very well marketed. And that is why they have, sold
Yeah.
tons and tons of them. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, I'm not going to name names because that would be a bit childish. But yeah, definitely marketing is the place to start. So if you want to write fiction, then good luck. If you want to write non-fiction, um, what I would say is start off with your ideal client in mind,
Yeah.
and make sure that you know that that person actually wants to buy what you're selling. So if you look at the one that I'm working on at the moment, it's called Flat Pack Sober, and what that book is based on the fact that I'm a little bit obsessed with what keeps people sober, but
Yeah.
it's also based on the fact that all of the evidence shows that at some point between 3 and 15 months, people tend to have a bit of a dip in satisfaction and their journey through sobriety. And what I want this book to do is to meet those people before they get too low in that dip so that they can work their way through it and find their own path to sobriety. So it's based on a genuine need that
Yeah.
really exists and I can prove. And then from the back of that, what we've been doing is we've been doing some research into who are the kind of people that engage with the Facebook pages, that engage with the Instagram stuff, so that we can, craft the book for them rather than just me writing what I think would be interesting,
Yeah.
which is not a great idea. We're actually trying to work out who it is that would want to buy it and then write it for them.
Yeah, yeah, that's really, really good tip actually, and so important. Like you say, it's that a lot of things come back to that absolute clarity about your ideal client or your customer who you're writing for, don't they? And where do they hang out? What do they do all day? What are their interests? What are their pain points? All of that stuff, which is kind of marketing 101.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, is what makes the world go round, isn't it?
yeah. And I think there's something else about creating the parachute whilst you're still in the plane. So if you can build a platform while you are writing the book, if you can interest people in the book whilst you're writing it, either creating a Facebook page or
Yeah,
just an Instagram account or a podcast or a video series, but something that actually engages people whilst you are writing the book. And then you can actually involve them in the writing of the book. You say, look, I've got these three taglines floating around in my head. Which one do you think is the best?
oh, what a good idea.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then you can build that engagement. You can build that platform. You can get them to help you beta read it. You can get them to
yeah,
help you do so much in terms of choosing the design and things like that.
yes.
Then once you've actually released the book, you've got a whole load of people that are really, really interested in it. And that is proven successful tactics. That is effectively what Annie Grace did with This Naked Mind, which
Yes, yeah.
your listeners have probably heard of,
Yes, I'm
because
sure, yeah.
she is very, very good at marketing.
Yeah, she's savvy. She is a savvy marketeer, definitely. And do you know, that is something that actually could reinvigorate my interest in my own book, ironically. I actually think that building a little community of people who it's aimed at, which is HR professionals and people who have the word well-being in their job title, could be a really useful thing to do, and test it and say, well, what else would you want to know, and which bits of it are boring and which bits of it are really interesting. I might have to get onto that.
Yeah,
Add
and
that onto my very long list of things to do. Yeah.
if we're being really totally and utterly cynical about things, market research is actually quite a good sales technique. So
Yeah.
if you get in touch with some of these HR professionals and you say to them, "Look, I am writing this book. I was wondering if you could spare me 10 minutes, and I will, ask you a few questions about what it is you would want from a book like this."
Yes.
The ones that actually bother to reply to you are already warmed up leads.
Yeah.
And if you build the rapport whilst you're talking to them, you never know what might come out of it. I have
Yeah.
accidentally sold things that way. It's
Yes.
like genuinely wasn't, I
Yeah.
didn't mean to.
Yeah.
But, we get into this conversation. I'm just picking their brains, and all of a sudden they've realized that they've got a hole in their business that I
Yeah.
can plug. And all of a sudden
Interesting.
they're biting my hand off.
That's so interesting. Yeah. What a fantastic idea. I love it. So you've got your community, you've got your books work in progress, you're really clear on your target. What else? So what about the publishing process? Like, I presume that most people now are self-publishing or using like a third party, or are you actually pursuing traditional publishers? What are you doing in that arena?
So I do what I call traditional self-publishing, which is self-publishing done properly. So
Yes.
I have a development editor, a line editor, and a proofreader to make sure that it reads well and it is not grammatically incorrect. Because as I pointed out earlier, I am not the strongest on spelling and grammar. It's like
Yes.
medalist had two L's in it. If you're British, who knew?
Who knew?
Anyway, there's that kind of like editorial team, but then there's also, you need a book cover designer, you need a
Yeah.
layout designer, you need an illustrator, you need a photographer. I'm happy to, get in touch. I'm happy to share the names of the people that I work with. They might not be the
Yeah.
right people for you, but they'd certainly be a good start. I rely very heavily on my assistant to do a lot of the kind of like project management kind of stuff, because it's not
Yeah.
really my strong point. So that's another area of help you need. So that's what I do, which I call traditional self-publishing, which is self-publishing done properly. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, you could knock it up in a Word document, get it on Amazon in 2 weeks, but it'll be rubbish, and
Yeah.
nothing damages your career quite like a really bad book.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the other ways you can do it is you can do hybrid, which is whereby you effectively pay somebody to do the project management. They will kind of commission freelancers to do the editorial stuff and the design stuff, or depending on the house, some of them will do the bits of the editing or bits of the design themselves, depending on how they're set up. If you're interested in hybrid publishing, I can recommend a couple of people, but be really, really careful, because there are some absolute sharks in the hybrid
Yeah.
publishing, and they promise an awful lot and they deliver nothing. Or
Yes.
you can do traditional publishing, which is whereby you would get a literary agent, and they would then go and hawk your work to the various publishing houses, and then the publishing houses would pay to engage freelancers or in-house people to do the design and the edit stuff. And if you're extremely lucky, they might pay you some money to write it. And if you're extremely, extremely lucky, they might do a bit of marketing. But in general, if you're a first-time author, they will expect you to do the lion's share of the marketing.
Yeah.
Being published traditionally, it increases your reach, so your book will get to more places. But you will still have to be grinding it out and appearing on podcasts and going, Real Men Quit is an amazing book. You guys should get it. It's from Amazon. It's like a fantastic book. You will just keep repeating that again and again and again
Yeah.
until you get bored of it.
Yeah, I know. And obviously the royalties that you can make when you're self-published, well, you make what people buy the book for. So it's much more of an entrepreneurial thing to do, really. Whereas with the traditional publishing houses, they take on that and sort of give you a bit of spare change that's left over at the end if
Oh
you're
yeah,
lucky.
yeah. So the thing about Real Men Quit is I priced it at $9.99 because I wanted it to sell and I want to
Yeah,
get it into people's hands. And if it was published traditionally, there's no way they would sell it for that. It would be
yeah,
probably more like 12.99, 13.99,
yeah,
and I still would only get pence from selling it. I mean, the thing is, if you're running a lot of events or you're speaking a lot, then book sales can be incredibly lucrative. I know people who I know a guy, and his trick is he basically, when he gets booked for a speaking gig, he'll say, "Oh, and how many people will be in the audience?" And they'll say,
yeah,
"Oh, there'll be 80 people in the audience." He says, "Oh, that's great. I'll send you 8 books." So he gives them 10% of the audience, he gives them free books for. And occasionally they just give them out, as
yeah.
prizes or just give them out to the staff. But more often than not, they go, "Oh, well, we better buy 72 more for the rest of the people in the audience." And then he sells them to 72 books at list price, which of
Yeah,
course, is $8.99 or whatever it is. He's
yeah.
buying them for £3. That is a very entrepreneurial strategy.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes. Note to self. Must get onto this. Must finish the flipping book.
Well, look,
Yeah.
if you want, I can sell you a job lot of any of my books. You can sell anything.
Yeah, that's a good idea. It might be a bit quicker. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, fantastic. So I think that is a really, really good roundup of how to kind of go about it. I want to ask you a bit more about, well, before we move on to a bit more about you, give us your sales pitch for Real Men Quit.
So, Real Men Quit is the armchair macho guide to getting your drinking under control. Because I'm sure you and all of your audience know that there are an awful lot of amazing women in the quit lit space. I've already mentioned Annie Grace, Claire Pooley, Quit Like a Woman. There's so many great books out there that are written by women for women. Men, however, not so much. We are downright rubbish at talking about sobriety. And I wanted to write something that actually spoke to men. So there's lots of sports, there's lots of Star Wars, there's lots of James Bond. There is an awful lot of really bad jokes.
Yes.
So, if that's your kind of thing, then Real Men Quit is the book for you.
Well, I love that. And actually, I'm thinking about opportunities that I've got to help you sell as well, which I do have because I spend a lot of time with employers talking about adding alcohol to their workplace wellbeing agenda. And I have, so I'm definitely going to start including your book in the leaflet that I hand out to employers. So I'll definitely make sure to do that for you. And
Thank you very much.
I used to sometimes recommend the Russell Brand book, but that feels a little bit off brand, so to speak, because like you say, there's not been that many that are written by men for men, and he's
Yeah, and
definitely
I,
struck that
I
one
did
off my
not.
list.
I did not really get on with that one
Yeah,
when I first tried to read it, and then I sort of thought I really need to get back into it and like actually finish it. And then all of the stuff with Russell Brand kicked off, and all of a sudden, loads of copies of his book ended up in charity shops. So I got one nice and cheap. So
yes, indeed.
yeah.
I had a small panic about the fact that it was in my recommended reading and had to quickly reissue all my resources to the employers that I work with. Oh, yeah, not a fun day. But yeah, so just going back to a little bit more about you then. So you've talked a little bit already about what inspires you to write and the work that you did, like with the Alan Carr clinic, which incidentally I used that Alan Carr book to stop smoking when I was in my 20s, so I know exactly what you're talking about, and very, very effective. What else inspires you? What makes you get up in the morning and want to write or market?
So I met a guy. I worked with a guy, and he'd been through the Royal Marine Commando selection process, which that's a tough selection process. It's the longest infantry training course in the world. So he's obviously quite a tough guy. He's got willpower, discipline, self control, and after that wasn't really enough for him. So after that, he passed the selection for the Special Boat Service. He did 6 years in the Special Boat Service, the elite of the elite, the absolute cream of the British Armed Forces. Like, as I say, he's a guy with willpower, what the Americans call intestinal fortitude. And,
Ooh,
when he came out of the services, he started his own business. He was incredibly successful at that. It was all going really, really well. He had everything in his life absolutely under control, but he just couldn't get control of his drinking. And chatting to him, it was so interesting that every other area of his life was absolutely squared away, but he was just lost when it came to alcohol. And it really, it struck me that if somebody like that, with that much willpower and that much self-control and that much discipline, can get caught in the trap, then, none of us should feel bad about
yeah,
getting caught in the trap. And it's like, he was one of the reasons why I thought I really need to share this. I really need people to understand that it can happen to any of us.
yeah,
I know that there is some disagreement in the recovery community about whether it's the individual or whether it's the drug, but I firmly believe that if you pour enough vodka down the Dalai Lama's throat, he's going to get some pretty serious problems.
agree.
So I just, I want to share that with all of the men out there who are drinking too much and are sitting alone in their house, in their flat, thinking that they are on their own, that they are different and that they are weak and that there's nobody else out there like them. And, I want to get that message across to them and just tell them that they are not alone.
Yeah, brilliant. And I agree with you, by the way. It's the substance. But I know it's a point of dispute, and not
Yeah,
everyone
no,
will
well,
agree with me.
I mean, I think, having done quite a bit of research into it ourselves, what we found was there is, unsurprisingly, a huge amount of people that start drinking because of childhood trauma. There are quite a lot of people who sort of drink at what might be described as a relatively normal level until some traumatic event happens in
Yeah,
their adult life, car crash, job loss, divorce, grief, those kind of things. But there is also a bucket of people who tend to drink for reasons around social anxiety and fitting in. And some of them, it's just like, they just want to party. So
yeah,
there is an element of trauma that underpins a lot of drinking, but there is no amount of trauma that you can give somebody that will guarantee that they get a drinking problem. But I think there is an amount of alcohol that you can give somebody that will guarantee they get a drinking problem. So yes,
yeah,
the life experience of the drinker is important, but the drink is the problem.
yeah. Well said. Well said. Yeah. So, reflecting back on your time then as an author, a writer, a marketeer of books, what would you say that your biggest mistake that you've ever made is?
Well, aside from starting drinking, the biggest mistake I made in writing, I think the first probably the first 2 or 3 books I wrote simply because I wanted to write and I wasn't really clear about who they were for. And
Yeah,
they definitely didn't fulfill really that much of a need within my business. And that, I think, it is a mistake, because if you can use a book as a business card, it can be very, very effective. So if
yeah,
I wrote a book which is effectively a coaching program for people in local government, and that works really, really well, because I've like literally sold maybe 4 copies in the entire history of the world, but I've given away quite a few copies, and if I give it to the right people, I always end up getting work off the back of it,
yeah,
because they read it, they see the possibilities. I don't hold anything back in my books. I don't like hide the good stuff and don't share that. But everybody wants you to take the information that you've given them and apply it to their situation for them.
yeah,
So if
yeah,
you can do that and actually be really clear about the space it holds in your business,
yeah,
and then that I guess is the test. if you could give it away and still make money out of it, then it is a book that's worth writing from a business point of view. If you
Yeah.
couldn't give it away, if you could give it away but not make money out of it, then it's probably more of something that you want to do. And I'm not saying that's wrong. You know, if you want to write
Yeah.
a book for your own spiritual enlightenment, do it, dude. For me, writing is the greatest form of free therapy ever.
Yeah. It's
But
a good
you've got to be
point.
clear about why you're doing it. And if you're doing it for your own kind of ends, then don't spend thousands and thousands of pounds on engaging really, really good professionals to make it amazing, because you'll
Yeah.
never get the money back.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really good advice. Really good advice.
Yeah, I
And
might
what?
even start taking it one day. You never know.
Well, what about you? The thing that you're most proud of? What would you
The
say
thing
that
that I'm
was?
most proud of, I mean, I think I changed the imprint of all of my books recently, and I changed it to Bhaskaran Brown and Daughter, because everything I
Oh,
do, I just kind of do as Bhaskaran Brown or BhaskaranBrown.com. And I thought, you know what, that just sounds a bit odd and it sounds a bit rubbish. So I've started changing things to Bhaskaran Brown and Daughter. And, you know, being able to change the imprint on Nielsen Title Editor is not what I mean by my greatest achievement. It is my daughter. And, you know, I want to kind of remind myself on a daily basis that everything I do for her and for my wife. And, you know,
yeah.
but she is definitely
Yeah.
the best thing in my life. And I love spending time with her. And, you know, I hope she does join me in the family business. You know, not like that she gets a drinking problem, gets sober, but she comes and joins me in the family business.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. How old is she?
She's 7, so she'll be doing my TikTok in a matter of months, I'm sure.
Definitely. Definitely. I have to say, when I was first starting out, I did use my children to help me. I mean, they were teenagers. I used to pay them, I used to be able to get away with paying them £5 an hour. Imagine that, when they were quite young, to do like social media scheduling and all sorts. And then they found out about minimum wage and it all got a bit more expensive.
Yeah,
But it was really useful in the early days. So you never know. You never know. And I tell you what, they're pretty savvy as well. They show you a few shortcuts, and they taught me how to do video editing and things like that. So it's been really useful.
well, yeah. I mean, she doesn't understand the way the world used to be back when it was rubbish, does she? I mean, that's
No.
one of the things that I think is most amusing, is that she doesn't get the concept of television schedules, because television
No.
has always been an on-demand thing for her.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
why would you wait until like 3:30 to watch the show you want to watch? You obviously
Yeah.
just get home from school and put on Netflix and watch whatever you want.
I know, isn't it strange? And the idea of not having a mobile phone, that's the one that I think my kids can't understand. So, well, why didn't you just phone each other? It's like, well, you're telling them about, I don't know, like an incident or an accident or like some drama that happened years ago. And they're like, and there was no mobile phone. So someone had to go
Yeah.
and run and find a phone box. And they're like, whoa.
I used to do a little bit of like proper research stuff, and I was in one of these libraries, reading old newspapers on like the microfilm kind of
Oh,
readers.
microfiche thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and they had a school party they were showing around the sort of like archive section, and the librarian came up to me and said, do you mind if I just tell the kids what you're doing? I'm like, no, help yourself. And he said to them, do you remember when cameras used to have film in them? And they all just looked at her completely blank. It's like, no, these kids have
No,
got no idea what film
no,
is, you know?
no.
Everything is digital for them. Do you want me to get one of these things the film canister things, and you can show them.
Oh,
But it was just made me
yeah.
laugh so much.
That is funny, yeah. Like, no, you need to, yeah, because that must have felt quite recent to the librarian, and actually, it's a really long time ago. For
Yeah,
kids,
well,
it's a
it's one of
lifetime.
those
Yeah,
interesting things, isn't it, about language, that we still call them films, even though
yeah.
they're probably not recorded on film anymore. They're
No,
certainly
not at
not
all.
film in the cinema. And I wonder how long we will persist on saying going for a drink, even when, the vast majority of people in life have got sober, and all
Yeah,
we do is go out for a nice alcohol-free beer or maybe
yeah,
some sparkling water. We'll still be saying, let's go for a drink.
yeah. I know it is. It's interesting, isn't it? I guess it is a drink. It's just, I think, decoupling alcohol, which just seems to own the word drink. That will potentially happen where going for a drink does not necessarily mean having alcohol. In fact,
Yeah.
I think that is starting to happen, I have to say, which is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the posts that you get this time of year, and people, they've done a few weeks of not drinking, and they start talking about all of the energy and the presence
Yeah,
and the improvement in their relationship, and then they always end it by saying, "So being sober's great. Who knew?" And I always want to tap on my little keyboard and go, well, I knew,
yeah,
and Janet knew, and actually quite a lot of people knew. And honestly, if we had the advertising budget that the alcohol industry got, you'd
yeah,
know.
you
But
really
the
would.
thing is, there is a difference, isn't there? The alcohol industry is trying to sell a lie, and we are trying to sell the truth. And the
Yeah,
truth will always out. No matter how deep you bury the bodies, the truth always comes
yeah,
out.
love it. Yeah, and here it comes. So I just wanted to ask you before we wrap up, I have two last questions that I ask all of my guests. So the first one is a bit of a selfish one, this, but how has being part of the Sober Business Network helped you?
Well, I think it's great just to be a part of a network, and
Yeah,
to realize that there are actually many more sober entrepreneurs out there. And I never really thought I was that interested in other people. I always thought I was a bit of a loner, and I could do it all myself. And I don't know whether that's part of the sort of the drinker's mindset or not. But what I have noticed of late is that partnership is the way forward. And the
yeah,
more I work with other people, the more it propels everything that I do. Not simply in terms of writing, but in terms of all of the stuff that we're doing at the moment with the business, working with other coaches, other speakers, other trainers. It's very, very exciting. And it's elevating everything I do. So, just being part of it and getting that support is one thing, but then meeting some fantastic people and really propelling my business forward, that's been a game changer.
yeah, absolutely. That's why I set it up. So, what a great answer. I mean, I noticed how much my business grew when I started collaborating with other sober entrepreneurs. And I looked for a sober business network and I couldn't find one. So, I set one up and it's been such fun. So, thank you for joining. I'm very, very grateful to have you as one of my early members, which is exciting. And then, my final question, and this is a tough one, everyone always finds this difficult. What is the single one best thing about being sober?
Oh, I got to pick one. Oh,
You've got to try.
I, I think that I'm not sure my wife would necessarily agree, but I think I have become emotionally a lot more mature. I did say emotionally, my jokes are still pretty childish, but I think,
Good.
that ability to kind of actually engage with the world on an emotional level, that has, it didn't come straight away, and it's taken work, and it's come in the fullness of time. And like I say, I think my wife would probably point out I've still got some work to do, but the ability to do the work is,
Yeah.
that's the key to it. But yeah, definitely, not running away from my emotions, actually standing in front of them and actually being able to have a grown-up conversation about them.
Yeah.
That's so big.
Amazing. What a great answer, and something that so many of us are stuck in the kind of early teens when it comes to processing emotions. And then it's like, it's like everything's been on hold, and you get sober, and it's like, oh, now I've got to pick back up from here, and it is tough, isn't
Yeah.
it? In the early days, it
I
is.
mean, there's that classic phrase that you don't grow when you're drinking, and
Yeah,
that's obviously a very terrible thing. But considering I started drinking when I was 14 and
yeah,
I've been sober for 8.5 years, I'm now 22.
yeah.
So that's pretty good.
Yeah, no, I'm similar. I started drinking when I was 14 and I've been sober for nearly 4 years. So I'm almost an adult.
Wow,
Amazing.
cool. Yeah,
Almost
when's your
18.
18th? We should have a
Yeah,
party.
it's in June. It's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, it's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. Well, listen, before we wrap up, just tell everybody where they can find out more about you and your work.
Yeah, so if you want to grab yourself a free copy of Get Over Indulgence, just type getover.uk into the interweb, and that will take you to a page on my website where you can get Kindle or audio, whatever you like. But that will also take you to my website. There's a ton of resources on there. I'm also pretty busy on LinkedIn, do a lot on Facebook and Instagram. If you can spell Bhaskaran, then I am very easy to find. If you can't spell Bhaskaran Brown, then either put Real Men Quit into the internet, and that'll take you to Amazon where you can get the book, or getover.uk, and all the links to the socials are on my website.
Oh, thank you so much, Duncan. And if you're interested in joining the Sober Business Network, just head over to soberbusinessnetwork.co.uk and give us, have a look at our directory, have a browse of some of our members, and you can join on that site as well. We'd love to welcome you into our networking meetings. So, yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for being a great guest and for sharing with us, Duncan.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. Thank you.